What's going on, everyone? This is Ace, and welcome back to The Reckoning. And today we are talking about Evil Ernie in the story called Pieces of Me. Now, this would essentially be an origin story to how a young boy would become warped and changed into the psychotic killer and bringer of Megadeth. What makes this tale different is that it's not the actual tale of Ernest Fairchild being undead and then transformed into what we would know as Evil Ernie, but it's rather the beginning of the unraveling of his mind and how he will drift into madness. But before we begin, if you enjoy what we do here on The Reckoning, then please hit that like button. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well, click the bell, and also feel free to share the video with anyone who you know loves Lady Death or the Chaos and Coffin verses. So as I mentioned before, Pieces of Me is a story that goes into the part of Evil Ernie's life where we see him as Ernest Fairchild still, and how he will eventually form and be shaped into the evil one that we all know and love. But perhaps we should go into some more context before diving in too deeply. I won't go too far in depth with all of Evil Ernie's origin. That will definitely be a video for another time, but for those of you that are new, I would like to get you up to speed to where we are in the context of this current story. So again, this video is covering the tale Pieces of Me, but I will be touching upon information from Evil Ernie's other stories, Youth Gone Wild and The Resurrection, as they seem to be the first and main glimpses into Evil Ernie's childhood, a time when he was a young boy known as Ernest Fairchild. We have a flashback from Dr. Leonard Price, who is Evil Ernie's main antagonist, depending on how you view the story, but who also was his doctor. During the story of Evil Ernie, The Resurrection, Dr. Price is explaining to the court that Ernest Fairchild was supernatural, and that's why his reanimation from the dead couldn't be explained logically. He cries out mostly to deaf ears, however, but admits to discovering that the boy was telepathic. He also knows that he was severely abused as a child and explains why. He states, "He was different. He was telepathic, and his tight-lipped, upper-crust parents couldn't stand it." He slams all the evidence and notes from when Ernest Fairchild was in his care down in front of the court. Now, we see elements of this within Evil Ernie's first story, Youth Gone Wild, where the Fairchilds approach Dr. Price with their son Ernest for the first time. "We're very concerned about our son, Doctor. He's so withdrawn. He's not like other children.
You disappoint me, Ernie.
We shower him with love, but he doesn't respond."
That's it, little mister. That's it.
"You're our last hope, Doctor." Leonard Price continues, "The Fairchilds were not a happy family. The Mr. and Mrs. were certifiable nut jobs. Things got worse when Ernie's telepathic abilities manifested. The beatings only got worse." Now, during the previously mentioned court hearing, Dr. Mary Young is also on trial and is being asked why she had chosen Ernie to be her newly developed machine test subject. She goes into detail about knowing about not only Ernest, but the Fairchild family before the killings. She states, "Ernie's parents, the Fairchilds, lived in my town. They owned a sawmill. They were very prominent. Almost everyone worked there. Us kids, we knew Ernie got beaten. We knew what his parents were doing, but we never did anything. Our parents told us not to. Maybe if we did something, then none of this would have ever happened." "Hello? Anyone home? Mr. Fairchild? It's Dr. Price." So now that you guys are caught up and have an idea of what occurred, I left out a lot of details, but don't worry, those will be videos for the future. But Ernest Fairchild, a severely abused boy, killed his parents along with 35 other people within his neighborhood, and he did it for love. Some of you may be confused by this, and well, the only other fact that I will mention is that Dr. Leonard Price also tested out his own invention called the Dream Probe. But due to Ernie's telepathic abilities, it led him to a gateway into the endless graveyard. It was here where he would be and fall for the one and only Lady Death. It's also here where she would explain her vision for Megadeth and entrust Ernest to accomplish this for her, and in return, she would love him forever. Ernie's first and only grasp of love would come from death. Afterwards, Ernest would now permanently be locked up in Clearview Mental Institution, and Dr. Price is now his full-time doctor. It's been several years since the initial incident, and within our current story, Pieces of Me, we get a bit more detail on specific figures that had a role in Evil Ernie's childhood, that he understood to have the opportunity to save him from his torturous parents, but who refused. We open up to the mental institution, and Dr. Price is trying to have Ernest explore his mind and relive a traumatizing moment from his own childhood. He is asking Ernie to confront something he is terrified of. Ernie describes going to a basement of some kind and recalls the stench of rotting stairs. The little boy knows something bad is down there, and there is thick uneasiness in the air. But still, Dr. Price urges him to keep going. The boy tries to reason and wishes to stop the exercise, but he has to keep reliving the experience. He describes seeing a chest in the room further into the basement, but upon looking into what's inside, he can't handle it and wakes up from the exercise and lashes out at Dr. Price. After restraining Ernie, Dr. Price recollects. Yet again, subject Ernest Fairchild refuses to face the contents of the chest in the basement. What is he afraid of? What's in the chest? Could it be the missing puzzle piece that explains his persona? Now, while Ernie is being restrained, one of the guards named McCord shows little empathy for him, proclaims that he can see with his own 2 eyes that there is nothing but evil within Ernest. What McCord failed to realize was that Ernie had secretly stolen McCord's keys from him just a few moments ago. Hours later, Nurse Goodwill goes to check on Ernie, but discovers him lying on the ground. Concerned, she runs to attend to him, but is horrified as the body lying on the ground is not Ernest at all, but McCord. And perhaps out of Ernie's sense of humor, both of McCord's eyes are plucked out of their sockets. Ernest Fairchild has escaped and is loose upon the neighborhood of Cedar Avenue once more. It's Halloween and the night is quiet. Since the murders those years ago, a lot of people have left the neighborhood. Only few stay behind. Now with Ernie on the loose, Dr. Price lets the local authorities know that Ernest has escaped. Sheriff Henry Sharp and his men go out looking for him, but at the same time, Dr. Price grabs his own gun and also goes out into the night looking for his patient. What happens next within this book is we see several encounters with individuals from Ernie's past. He has essentially come to hunt them down and continue his promise to Lady Death for Megadeth, which he started years ago. These individuals from Evil Ernie's past would be Erica Meanwell, who was his former elementary school principal, who essentially disregarded any evidence of physical abuse done to Ernest Fairchild. The next would have been a politician, Rudy Ballard, who would have been the mayor at the time of his youth and who was financially and essentially community supported from his parents, the Fairchilds. And finally, there would have been the sheriff from back then, Sheriff Benson. As this night progresses, Evil Ernie would one by one hunt them down. Sheriff Benson, running for his life, decides to go into Ernie's old house, hoping it would scare him off. Let's just say it doesn't end well for the old sheriff. But now that Ernie is inside his old house, it's here where Sheriff Sharp and his men close in on Ernie. Using the dark, unlit basement, Ernie is able to slaughter the police officers one by one. But before he can finish Sheriff Henry Sharp, Dr. Price barges in and tackles Ernie down a second flight of stairs. It's here they both realize that they are now in the very room with the chest in which Ernie is so afraid. Dr. Price recalls Ernie calling it the secret place. But as Ernie tries to attack the doctor, Leonard is able to knock him unconscious. When Ernie wakes up, Dr. Price is hovering over him and states, "You're gonna face your fears. Time for some regression therapy." Horrified, Ernie is forced to look into the chest. Now, while there is nothing inside currently, Ernest is mentally brought back to when he was a young boy, opening the chest and seeing a decaying, cut-up corpse. He screams, but Dr. Price isn't showing any sympathy. "I don't care what it is. I don't care what you're seeing. For all the pain, all the misery you caused this town, I hope it scares you." Ernie's memories come flooding in. He remembers looking around the room as a boy and seeing bodies dripping and swaying on meat hooks. Next thing he knows, his father, like a dark shadow, creeps up behind him. "Hello, son. I didn't expect you to find my secret place." Leaning toward the dead body within the chest, his father says, "Look at it, son. It wouldn't do God's work. I had to put it to rest, see? It's happy now. See it smile? They're friendly when they're dead. Dead ones are your friends. Say it, Ernest." Ernest tries yelling back out of fear and anger toward his dad that it is all wrong. Mr. Fairchild threatens to lock him up in the chest with the dead body until he says, "Dead ones are my friends." Meanwhile, in the current time, Dr. Price wants Ernie to beg for forgiveness before he shoots him. But just as the doctor is getting ready to pull the trigger, Sheriff Henry Sharp tells Price to stop and put the gun down. Ernie lunges after Dr. Price and is gunned down by the sheriff. But before collapsing, Ernie quietly utters, "I see now, Father, you were right," and then falls to the floor. Turns out, however, that Ernie would survive the gun wounds, and while in the back of the ambulance, he keeps repeating, "Dead ones are my friends. Dead ones are my friends." Dr. Price believes he is going to regret not finishing what he started, and ultimately, he would be right, as Ernest has put to rest more pieces of himself, and soon enough, Evil Ernie will be unleashed. Oh, the humanity. And that is Evil Ernie Pieces of Me. What do you guys think of that part in Evil Ernie's origin story? Also, for some of you fiends out there, you may be wondering about Evil Ernie's origin story within his ongoing, and I really don't count that as canon, and mainly because Brian Pulido himself had said as much. When asked about Pieces of Me, the story I covered today, he stated, "This now completes the story of Ernest Fairchild's humble beginnings. It's a story I promised you years ago. For the record, I don't count Evil Ernie Monthly number 4 or 5 as part of Evil Ernie's origin story. Nothing against the writer of those issues, but for my storytelling purposes, those stories, the flashbacks in particular, don't count." Now, he also added this when he asked about how he came up with the story. "It was a story that told itself. I was simply a vessel to tell it. It was always there in the dark recess of my mind. I had lots of fun writing this story too. It was like visiting an old friend, or in my case, visiting with family. Strangely, it was very comfortable. I don't know how I can access these dark, dark places. If you met me, you'd realize I'm an upbeat, fun guy. I love life and all, but when it comes to tell a tale, more often than not, it comes out dark. It's a gift, I suppose." Well, that is everything I have for you guys. Again, I really hope you enjoyed this story, and although I know it's pretty bleak and includes a lot of troubled and dark material, but it's part of the Evil One's origin story and why I thought it was appropriate to include in my Phase 1 of videos, Genesis of Agony. I want to include a foundation with this phase and build upon these when we are going forward for future videos and other phases. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys would like to see next, as I have plenty of things in store for you, but always open to suggestions. I really appreciate all the positive support you have given me so far, so can't wait to see what happens next as the channel develops. And but again, thank you so much for watching, and until next time guys, take care.